What if Doctor Who wasn't axed in 1989? Well, that's a question I've been trying to answer for about 4 years, and we're nearly at the end. Currently we're in the mid-2010s as we grow ever closer to the present day, based now purely on 25 years of detailed, complex and convoluted canon to follow, each decision to the next through cause and effect. Let's find out what the next season has in store, thanks to a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork. Season 52 of Doctor Who was originally intended to air from the 4th of March 2018 in one solid broadcast run for 12 weeks. However, as I announced in the Elysium Season 3 video on the 19th of December 2017, just 6 days before the Christmas special aired, the BBC would have made this announcement. Ronald D. Moore has been fired. Not even halfway through the production of Season 52, production was immediately halted, with only the Christmas and New Year's episodes as well as a further 4 episodes shot. The episodes which had been completed were episodes 1, 3, 9 and 10, however episode 5 was partway through production. The first thing the BBC did was order a mid-season break, so Doctor Who could still go out in March, starting on the 18th instead of the 4th, but after episode 6, there'd be a break until later in the year. They also made the decision to move Doctor Who to Sunday nights, following the ratings of Season 51 and the success the Elysium had there. The problem they did face, though, was that they only had 4 completed episodes and they needed at least 6 to make broadcast, as well as the fact 2 of the episodes they had shot were from the second half of the season. So firstly, episode 9 was moved to now be episode 4, with editing to remove references which fit into the second half of the season. Episode 10 was moved to be episode 2, with similar references removed. So the slots for episodes 1, 2, 3 and 4 were now filled, leaving only episodes 5 and 6 to be shot, and since their scheduled air dates were the 15th and 22nd of April, if they were shot first, when production started again in late February, then they could make their date, provided they were scripted in a way where minimal CGI would be used in the episodes. Well, some re-editing took place for episodes 1 to 4 and the specials weren't changed as it was too close to transmission date to properly work out what needed to be changed. As such, Ronald D. Moore is only credited as executive producer on the 2 specials and episodes 1 through 4, and not the remainder of the season. Block 3 originally had Terry McDonough in to direct, and about a quarter of episode 5 had been shot, however McDonough was fired alongside Moore, so when episode 5 started filming again as part of the new Block 4 in February, Mick Jackson, who had not been lined up to direct Doctor Who, but was brought in by the BBC with considerable persuading to shoot this block. Similarly, Gaynor Holmes ended up producing Block 4 herself, meaning she isn't credited as executive producer on episodes 5, 6 and 7, and just a producer. Also, due to the fact that most of the guest actors originally cast in episode 5 were now no longer available, and different actors had to be cast, no material from the original unfinished version of episode 5 was used. However, all the scenes were later released on DVD as extras. Because of the moving around of the episodes, it meant that for the first time since the block system was introduced, every episode was broadcast in the order they were basically shot. Another problem they had was the Elysium, as not only was Jane Espenson running both shows simultaneously now, but also the Elysium Season 4 was due to start filming in January and the Elysium was scheduled to air in September, which is the same time the BBC were looking to air for Season 52 Part 2, which would have meant the 2 would be airing on the same night. So Tony Graffia was promoted as a co-showrunner on the Elysium, and it was decided that Elysium Season 4 would be split into 2 parts, with the first airing in June after Season 52 Part 1, and the second airing in late October after Season 52 Part 2. This meant the Elysium had to rush to production and post-production for the first 6 episodes now to make their new broadcast date. Originally Season 52, Pete Fletcher would return as a companion in episode 1 and remain in the position for the rest of the season, but Sally would not have. However, Jane Espenson's first action as acting showrunner was to bring Sally back as a companion in the second half of the season from episode 5, which was an entirely new episode she'd wrote from scratch. It also brings Sally's wife Annie on board the TARDIS for the rest of the season to bring the TARDIS theme up to 4. In addition, from episode 5, Espenson's first episode, 15 gets a costume change to better suit the new 15 character. Espenson transitions the writing for 15, which happens over the course of the next 3 episodes slowly. We begin with a shot of Mars as it zooms into a city on the surface and a caption reads Mars 4127. We see inside and it's flooded with humans, a colony, vibrant, bursting with life. Around the city there's many bright green posters with the word exit on them, and then we see the glass of the city ceiling smash in as the spaceship descends, exposing the city to the Martian atmosphere, immediately killing everyone there, and the ship further crushes all the bodies. And then we see a task force of ice warriors step out the ship as they parade through the city as we cut to titles. We see Daniel Bevan arriving in the TARDIS again from the finale as he asks for the Doctor's help and then teleports her into his office on Mars. He tells her that he's an agent of the Space Security Service and tells her of the recent attack, saying that for hundreds of years humans and ice warriors have lived in peace on Mars since Earth joined the Galactic Federation, but now Earth has voted to exit the Federation and tensions have ramped back up. He says that the Earth government has ordered the colonists to move back to Earth, but they are refusing to, as it's been their home for hundreds of years, and the ice warriors want them to move as well, as they see it as their territory now. The next 45 minutes of this episode, so the majority, sees the Doctor and Bevan dealing and mediating with the situation, meeting colonists and trying to find a peaceful solution. The Doctor negotiates with the Ice Warriors and they all seem to come to a settlement at the 11th hour, as the Ice Warriors allow the humans to stay in the colony but leave over a longer space of time with a set 50-year transition period, which everyone seems happy with. As the episode's end draws near and it seems the story is coming to its conclusion, a spanner is thrown in the works, as when the Chief Ice Warrior and the leader of the Martian colonies are about to shake hands, a laser shoots across the screen and kills the Ice Warrior Chief. Everyone starts screaming as chaos erupts, and the Doctor and Daniel look around through the crowd, and standing in front of them, laughing, is the Master, as we cut to end credits. We begin with a recap of not just the previous episode but also parts of the Master story so far in Season 49 and Season 50 to bring any new viewers up to speed, as he wasn't in Season 51. The second half of this story becomes a standard Doctor versus the Master story, and the Ice Warrior colonist story falls for Daniel to lead in the B plot, which has about a 60-40 split with the A plot. Obviously, it turns out that the Master has been stoking up tensions between the two races as he was playing both sides, working with both the Ice Warriors and the humans in an attempt to break up the Galactic Federation entirely. However, when the Doctor asks if he was involved in the leave vote, the Master chuckles and says it was the humans themselves, thinking they'll be stronger alone in this universe. The Ice Warrior plot is resolved when Daniel sacrifices his life to kill the new Chief Ice Warrior, who as it turns out is an anti-Earth bigot, as he was the one who, without authority from the Ice Warriors, launched the attack at the start of the last episode. The new Ice Warrior Chief now has so much respect for the humans due to Daniel's honourable death and sacrifice that he says he will allow the humans to stay, and says that since they are neighbouring planets, a travel corridor will be open between the two planets. The Doctor obviously is dealing with the Master throughout as he tries to ensure the Galactic Federation breaks up so he can rule over some of the planets and just be evil. The Doctor manages to defeat the Master by tricking him into escaping, which, when he really escaped, just to a ship full of angry Ice Warriors after he murdered their old chief at the end of part 1. The episode ends with Daniel's funeral and the Doctor's heartbroken as she was planning to ask him to join the TARDIS, as the two had a lot of chemistry throughout the episode. Because of this, the Doctor takes the TARDIS at the end of the episode to Pete's house, where she lands in his living room, and she stands there with complete silence from Pete and fully apologises to him, to which Pete stays silent for a moment before breaking into tears and hugs the Doctor, and the two of them board the TARDIS once more before we cut to end credits. This episode would have received over 2,000 Ofcom complaints due to the heavy political messages in the episode, strongly criticising Brexit, which didn't play well for the BBC at all, as they were forced to issue a full apology. But they were able to blame it easily on Ronald D. Moore, as he was no longer in their employment, and yeah, the Not My Doctors were mad too. So, with all that's done, let's get to episode 1. The opening episode this season sees the Doctor and Pete land in San Francisco in the modern day. They look around the city and see the sights, as the Doctor babbles on about what happens to the city in the 51st century or something, to which Pete isn't really listening to. As they approach the Golden Gate Bridge, however, an alien spaceship crashes into the atmosphere with a tremendous drone. Suddenly, everyone is running and screaming, cars crash, the city is brought to a standstill. The Doctor and Pete run onto the bridge for a better view, and then, as the Doctor and Pete get to the other side, a beam grabs the bridge on the ship and begins dragging up the bridge through the sky. People and cars are falling off as this happens, including the Doctor and Pete who are on the side. Both of them manage to grab onto the road as they hang off it and is pulled upwards. Pete manages to get up onto the bridge and tries to pull the Doctor up. And then the bridge jolts and the Doctor falls off it, down to the river, hundreds of feet below. The plot then splits into two, the Doctor on Earth, in the aftermath of the disaster, after a scene of her managing to survive drowning and falling through being a Time Lord, and Pete is on the bridge as he's dragged through hyperspace. It turns out the Rastan Warriors are behind this, as there was a target on the bridge that they've got to take out, as it turns out this target is in fact a rogue Rastan Warrior, one of their own, who broke their programming and disguised themselves as a human to escape. Obviously, Pete befriends him right at the start, and his half of the episode plays out as a generic disaster movie, as Pete saves everyone, protects the target, and manages to get on board the Rastan ship to get the bridge transported back to Earth. On Earth, the Doctor works with the American branch of UNIT, with only a quick cameo from Katrin on the conference call, as they firstly deal with the aftermath of the disaster, and secondly try and find the spaceship to get the bridge back. Eventually, with the help of what the Doctor and UNIT do, alongside Pete actions, the bridge is returned, and the target is let go back to his normal life. This episode sees the Doctor and Pete arriving on the moon of the planet Kandoka, where they find themselves at the KERBLAM warehouse, which the Doctor explains is the interstellar retailer. They get involved in a conspiracy which turns into a terror incident, with the bubble wrap in the packaging being weaponized. This episode did cause some controversy, mainly due to its mixed messaging and criticism of companies like Amazon, which was too prevalent to be ignored, but not prevalent enough to say anything of importance. This episode was originally episode 10, and tonally felt off to viewers a bit in episode 2, but kinda still worked. This episode sees the Doctor and Pete land in 1623 colonial America, specifically in Virginia. This episode is everything you expect. It's a lot like the American Civil War arc in season 50, and this acts as a pure historical in that same way, and is very much there to teach children about the British Empire, focusing a lot on the horrors of what they committed as well, on the early relationships with the Native Americans. The story also continues to deal with the racism of the era head on, with several references made by the Doctor and Pete to their experiences last season in Rosa. This episode was originally intended to be shot as part of Block 1 on location in America, but due to budgetary reasons and growing hostilities between Moore and basically everyone else, Scotland ended up doubling for colonial America. This episode brings back the Tolians for their third appearance in Doctor Who, but also after a few appearances in the later season of the Elysium. We see the Doctor and Pete land on TOLIA in 3781, just 500 years since the events of the Food of Love, and a lot has changed. The planet is in civil war between the North and the South, but with both of them not recognising that the other exists and considering their territory as part of their own as just TOLIA. The Doctor and Pete get mixed up in the setting and these events, as they go from one side to the other in classic Doctor Who fashion and cause a bit of trouble. The story becomes a let's get back to the TARDIS story, and by the end of the episode that's what they do. However, at the end of the episode we see the leader of the Northern Tolians speaking to none other than the Rogue as we cut to end credits. And there we have it, the last episode under the direction of Ronald D. Moore, and from the next episode it's been 2.5 months later, filming wise, and with a set of almost entirely new scripts and storylines. This episode was the first under the leadership of Jane Espenson and was the first to be written, replacing an old episode by David Weddell and Bradley Thompson, which the BBC and CBS were unhappy with. The sole purpose of this episode was to reintroduce Sally as a companion, as well as bringing Annie on board as a companion too. The idea for this episode was to do something along the lines of Delayed Indefinitely, but this time on a train with a more physical monster. So it developed into a base under siege story on a train, and all in 1 hour of real time. Oh, and it isn't just any train, it's the Eurostar at night going through the Euro Tunnel. The Doctor and Pete land on there during the journey because they detect alien life signs, and it just so happens that Sally and Annie are going for a couple of nights away in Paris on the same train with Jade at her dad's, so out the way. It's a pretty simple episode. A lone Sultana is on board the train after being captured by a group of alien hunters and is being transported to Paris. However, it wakes up from sedation and basically wants to conquer Earth. The episode is mainly here, however, for the character building and healing as the Doctor and Sally reconcile, especially as Sally sees the Doctor just being the Doctor and saving the day. However, at the end of the episode, it's only by accident that Sally and Annie come along, as Sally still wants to stay with Annie and Jade at home. It's just in the final scene when the four are in the TARDIS saying goodbye, the TARDIS takes off, leaving the Doctor without any control, as we cut to the end credits. The mid-season finale is another replacement episode, throwing out the original episode 6 by Kevin Murphy and episode 7 by Ronald D. Moore. The story brings back the fan favourite Weeping Angels, last seen in the 2010 Christmas special, and the TARDIS is brought to another realm. The Doctor isn't sure where they are, as it seems like they're nowhere, but suddenly the world starts changing around them and they find themselves, for about 2/3 of the episode, on a Victorian ship on voyage to America, and ravaged by the Weeping Angels. This episode is an intense 40 minutes of horror, especially as the gothic setting as the crew is getting picked off one by one and the Doctor is letting it happen, as she knows they aren't real people, but Sally strongly disagrees, saying they can't know that for sure. As time runs out and the angels begin to close in on them, they find a prisoner on the boat. It's the Rogue. The walls then all fall down and they appear in nowhere again, but with the angels still surrounding them, and it turns out that they're in some sort of prison guarded by angels. As the cliffhanger closes in, the Doctor works out that it's not just any prison, it's a Dalek prison. So, before moving on to part 2 in the next video, let's have a briefly look at what part 1 would have looked like under the Moore regime. First up, we would have had chain reaction as normal before moving into a Kevin Murphy penned episode where the Doctor and Pete would have met Richard III. This episode was later rewritten by Adrian Hodges and included in part 2. After that, episode 3 would have been Coats of Blood, as it is here, but episode 4 would have been an episode penned by David Weddle and Bradley Thompson, which would have been a sequel to The Conspiracy of Pricemart. Like episode 2, this one wasn't shot before the firing, however it was rewritten by Adrian Hodges again for use later in the season, but with so many severe changes it ended up being something vastly different to the original Weddle and Thompson version. Episode 5 would have been another Weddle and Thompson episode, which the cliffhanger of episode 4 would have led into, and would have seen the Doctor and Pete arrive on Ascended Gallifrey, where she discovers that all the Vex there have been massacred by an unknown villain, which would have turned out to be the Daleks. This is the episode that was in production when it was halted and Moore was fired. And although a quarter of this episode was shot, the BBC asked for an entirely new episode to take its place, with only some of the original material making it onto the deleted scene and extras. Finally, episode 6 would have been written by Kevin Murphy and would have seen the Doctor making a pact with the Rogue and the Rani to defeat the Daleks and take back Gallifrey for the Time Lords or what's left of them. It would have ended with the TARDIS surviving back on the Elysium, where the Doctor would have made a deal with Unipisham and Riley to get the plan into action. And that's only the start of it. The second half of the season, which had already had its scripts finished, were much, much worse. And that's why the BBC pulled the plug. Stay tuned next time on Doctor Who as we look into episodes 6 to 12 of the broadcast season, before I again reveal the gossip on the episodes which never happened. But first, due to scheduling, because of this whole thing, the Elysium Season 4 Part 1 airs, so until then, goodbye.